All right, we have a pretty interesting article here from Politico about uh, Yang, and it's called "Is Yang Doing More Harm Than Good to the Case for a Universal Basic Income?" And the subheader is "His analysis is thin, his math is off, and he might be ruining what little consensus the idea has." Damn, it's a really scathing rebuke. This is written by Bill Scheer, who is a contributing editor to Politico magazine and co-host of the bloggingheads.tv show, the DMZ, which about 2% of the world population have heard of. At Tuesday's debate, Andrew Yang once again leaned heavily on his freedom dividend. This is after the fourth debate. His attempt at rebranding universal basic income in response to a question on automation, Yang argued that his program, in which the government would give 1,000 a month to every American over 18, would be better than a federal jobs guarantee. When we put the money into our hands, he said, we can build a trickle up economy from our people, our families, and our communities up. Inasmuch as Yang has surpassed our non existent expectations as a sharp and charismatic candidate, his presidential campaign has done little for the cause he says he represents. The hot idea that's transforming the 2020 primary is not universal basic income. It's Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax, which has prompted Bernie Sanders to outbid her and compelled the Joe Biden campaign to consider its own version. 4 years ago, Bernie Sanders similarly turned Medicare for All into a rallying cry that now a majority of House Democrats support, and several 2020 presidential candidates have adopted his position. Yang's freedom dividend has not caused the same kind of political reverberations. No major presidential candidate has adopted a proposal for a universal basic income in response to Yang's rise. Both Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are in fact outspoken opponents of UBI. Elizabeth Warren has given it a diplomatic reaction. I think there's so much more than we should do before we get there. Yang has had more influence over the marginal candidacies of Tulsi Gabbard and Marianne Williamson, both of whom have expressed support for UBI in varying degrees. That might be because Yang has so far shown himself to be a less than perfect pitchman to sell a multi-trillion-dollar transformation of America's economy and social contract. He lacks a strong resume. His economic analysis is thin, and his numbers don't easily add up. In fact, despite all of his success to date, Yang may end up hurting the UBI cause more than helping it. Trump may have proven that political outsiders from the business world can impress voters with their money making prowess, but Yang is not an especially successful businessman. Estimates put his net worth at less than Sanders, America's most famous socialist. His attempt to create 100,000 jobs through a nonprofit that supported entrepreneurship was a bust, and he has no experience at designing public policy or managing government agencies. Perhaps it's unsurprising that America is not following him into the very expensive unknown. Still, Yang seems to have had some success in moving public opinion. Scott Santens, one of America's leading universal basic income advocates, points to a recent Hill Harris Expo that found support for a universal basic income program that pays all Americans $1,000 per month, rising between February and September from 43% to 49%. The rise was particularly sharp among adults under 35, from 55% to 72%. There were also upward ticks among Republicans, 27% to 30%, independents, 44% to 48%. With no other obvious factors to cite, Santens reasonably argued to me in an interview that's pretty much almost entirely because of Yang. Santens is optimistic, but that a passing Santens is optimistic that a passionate niche constituency is forming. However small they are compared to the entire population, there are people who are very passionate about the idea of basic income, he said. Different economic conditions in, say, 2022, 2024, in regard to the effects of automation and stagnant wages will create additional pressure on candidates to put UBI in their platforms, he further predicted. But even if Yang had made universal basic income more popular than it was a year ago, that doesn't mean the issue has become part of the mainstream political discourse. 49% is not a gangbuster poll number for a policy idea, especially when pollsters don't mention any counterarguments. Plenty of ideas such as an assault weapons ban or public health insurance options have much stronger numbers and still have difficulty getting through Congress. Working in Yang's favor is the simplicity of his pitch. He taps economic fears and robots wiping out our jobs and offers a bumper sticker solution. His approach resonates with some economic pessimists across party lines. After hearing Yang sound the alarm about robot trucks devastating working class communities. Fox News' Tucker Carlson raised his perpetual furrowed brow and said, I sit with my jaw open. I agree with you so strongly. Carlson did not, however, discuss, let alone endorse Yang's policy proposal. At a Yang rally, CNN's John Sarlin interviewed a former Trump supporter who said Yang convinced him that it's not immigration, it's automation. But Yang overstates the threats of robots coming for your paycheck and typing UBI to a vision of the future that may not come to pass might well undermine other cases for the proposal. Okay, I'm gonna stop it there because it just goes on and on and on and on. Sometimes you don't need 30 paragraphs to make your point. So one of the arguments that was said was that Yang doesn't have a UBI has not shown the same level of resonance as Medicare for All, which, to the writer's credit, has become a thing that pretty much all of the Democratic candidates have had to have given, for the most part, either some support for, whether it's a variation like Buttigieg's Medicare for All who want it, or they have to address it even if they oppose it, like Klobuchar or Biden. But here's the thing. Single payer, in my view, as someone that followed Sanders, or who has followed Sanders in his activities, both in running for office and for being a senator, I don't really think it became a major thing that the party was talking about until the early years of Trump taking over, or rather since Trump's taken over, because it was the year after the election that he introduced the bill in the Congress, and the Justice Democrats came around. Basically, I don't think his campaign alone, and if you look actually at the campaign by itself, you'll be very hard pressed to find clips of any Democrats talking about single payer health care when he initially ran for office. What's very likely to happen is, and they concede that Gabbard and Williamson have spoken out about this idea, UBI. But noticeably, the person who wrote this article decided that they wanted to goalpost. Oh, well, those are marginal candidacies. What the hell does that even mean? What, do you have to poll at 8% for your position on UBI to be taken seriously, or to actually matter as a person who has talked about his idea? Like it didn't make any sense to me. But what I find even more comedic is when you have a person who literally says in this article, and it's further up here. And by the way, this thing is, God, they just pad it out and pad it out. What does Yang's net worth? And I'm rereading this because I'm trying to figure out. I like to assume people are making good faith arguments. What does Yang's net worth have to do with UBI? Because you can actually read it right here. They say Yang is not an especially successful businessman. Estimates put his net worth at less than Sanders. Keep in mind, Sanders became a millionaire after he wrote a book, which was followed by him getting a huge bump in name recognition after the 2016 election. So Yang, as a person who most people were not familiar with prior to his campaign, theoretically could do the same thing or try to do some other public venture and be more successful from having higher name recognition. But again, those are things they like to leave out for convenience. And I still would like to know what makes this writer the designated person on what a successful businessman is. Because and they brought Trump up, they said, oh, Trump was da, 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 da. It's like, okay, but you realize Trump went bankrupt 4 times. And if someone like that can still win an election or, the nomination, whichever way, however far you think he'll get, I don't want to hear it. You don't try to use Yang's lack of business success, according to them, as some deterrent for him possibly being able to win, when the person who won the Republican nomination last time was someone who went bankrupt this many times. Let me find one more point of this, because stuff gets a little too ridiculous. So they point out that the numbers of people supporting UBI have gone up marginally, 44, 49, for independents, that stuff like that. No one, and I'm saying this as someone that is, I give credit to candidates when they offer things. If Yang did not enter this race, none of these candidates whether they be the grassroots supporting ones like Sanders or Warren or Gabbard, or the establishment ones like Klobuchar and Biden, would be talking about UBI or even acting like it exists were it not for Yang getting in. Now, if he decided, you know what, I'm not even going to enter this race, no one would be discussing this issue. And that's the legacy of his campaign, the public discourse and the renewed attention in an idea that's been around for a while. Just like with Sanders's activities after the election, boosting the recognition of single payer. A lot of times, you can't look at something while it's going on and in the immediate moment go, oh yes, this is what has successfully occurred since this, because stuff is still happening. So it's a dumb article, more smears by people that don't know what they're talking about.